In a world of FX3s and Red Komodos and Pixis 6Ks and Nikon ZRs and Panasonics and Fujifilm cameras, today we're going to see how the Canon C50 stacks up. Alright, if you're new to the channel, hi, my name is Ben Meredith. I'm a Los Angeles-based cinematographer and director. And today we're going to be looking at the Canon C50. Now, I rented this camera with my own money. This video is not sponsored by Canon in any way. These are just my opinions on the camera. Now, if you've seen my Nikon ZR review, this video is going to be very similar. I did not get too granular and test every single nuance setting and codec and everything that the Canon C50 has to offer. We will go into some of that stuff, but mainly this is about the 7K RAW open gate and what I think of the image. And this is also coming from a DP's perspective. I very much came up in the narrative world. And even though I do a lot of different kinds of work, when I test a camera, I'm mostly looking at it from that angle. How will it hold up on a set for narrative filmmaking? So I'm not really looking so much at general content creation, because I think pretty much any camera nowadays is going to be really good for that. And when I review these cameras, I'm also comparing them to tons of different cameras I've used throughout the past 10 plus years in the industry. So if you want a more tech-based review, there's a lot of people like Gerald Undone who are really good at that, but this video is not really going to be that type of video. And just to give you some insight into my perspective, throughout the last 10 plus years in the industry, I've shot 3 feature films, award-winning short films, tons of music videos and commercials. I've been on sets like Euphoria. I've worked with DPs like Bradford Young and Natasha Breer. And I've just had a ton of accumulated hours working on sets with all kinds of cameras, all kinds of lenses, lights, etc. So my perspective on cameras is not so much tech-based, but more feeling-based. How does the image feel to me? What is the texture? What is the motion cadence? What is the thickness of the negative? And I put this in the Nikon ZR video, but for a quick reminder, here's a list of some of the cameras I've used. So with all that in mind, let's jump into the Canon C50 and how it holds up. Now, I'll be totally honest, I was not excited at all to review this camera. I do love testing cameras in general, so that part I was hyped on, but there's something about Canon that just never really did it for me. I know a ton of people use Canons, I know they're wonderful cameras, they're just never my go-to choice. As you can see in that list, I have used a good deal of Canons, but in the past 5 years or so, I haven't used a lot of their newer cameras. And I'm probably biased, but I think it just boils down to me always finding their image a little too digital. It just had a video quality to it that I didn't really love. So although they have great colors and great specs and great ergonomics, the images never really spoke to me. So we're gonna see if the Canon C50 is any different. So first, let's get some of the boring stuff out of the way. The ergonomics. I will say hats off to Canon. The ergonomics on the Canon C50 are outstanding. I love the way it feels. I love the way it handles. The grip is really nice. The size is wonderful. If you see here, it's not that much bigger than the Nikon ZR. It's just a little thicker. The top handle is amazing. It has a little finger groove. You can get a really nice grip on it. And I love that it has built-in XLR for quality audio. It's also really light. I was kind of blown away by how light the camera was when I first picked it up. It's not much heavier, if at all, than the Nikon ZR. The screen, I'm really spoiled with the Nikon ZR. In my opinion, every camera moving forward should have a screen like the Nikon ZR. It truly is a game changer. And when I go back to a screen like the Canon C50, a smaller 3-inch screen, it just doesn't do the job. In a pinch, I can use it if I have to and pull focus and all that, but it just leaves a lot to be desired. But it's nice that it's there. All the ports and I/O are really great. It's USB-C, full-size HDMI. I like that they built in a little timecode port so you can sync with audio, and they threw in a healthy amount of mounting points too. So ergonomics, I think the Canon C50 knocks it out of the park. Let's talk autofocus really quick. I didn't use it. I didn't get a Canon lens when I rented the camera, so I used my vintage FD glass and my Blazar Anamorphics. Canon's always been known to have great autofocus. I imagine imagine it performs very well. Let's talk audio. I plugged in my Rode NTG4 into the XLR inputs in the top handle. Here's a little clip of some of the audio. This is a Rode NTG4 with phantom power on, plugged straight into the handle. And this is, guys, this is your audio test. This is it right here. All right, let's briefly touch on the H.265 codec. It's great. Canon definitely does it right. Unfortunately, the Nikon ZR still doesn't have any updates in that area, and I'm hoping the H.265 codec gets an improvement on that camera. But for cameras like the Canon C50 or the Panasonics, they do the H.265 codec really well. I only tested the all-intra codec in 7K open gate. Here's a quick comparison of that codec compared to the RAW. Now the C50 has a lot of other codec options, and I didn't go through all of them, but I do like that you can shoot open gate or full frame mode or even Super 35, and you can get some really data-friendly codecs in this camera. But let's dig into the star of the show, the open gate 7K Canon RAW. From what I saw, they offer 3 different flavors of RAW. There's the high quality, the standard, and the LT, which is their version of light RAW. I shot everything in 7K open gate standard. We used my Blazar Mantis Anamorphics as well as my vintage set of Canon FDs. Everything here was shot on a 50mm at 2.8. We're gonna look at the straight out of camera RAW to Rec 709 using color transforms. Then we're gonna look at a mild creative grade that I put on the footage. And then we're gonna use Dehancer, a film emulation, to really push the footage and see how filmic we can get it. And you'll see in the anamorphic footage, I shot it in 24 Hertz mode, and we'll get into that after we look at the footage. Everything else was shot in the standard 60 Hertz mode at 23.98 frames per second. Let's take a look.
I'll keep my hand here on your back. I won't move it while you sleep. Shaking hours have settled down, 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 down. Take all the help that you need. Put it on just like an evening dress. Parade to the right, sway to the left. In the morning everything is spent, and I make my way back home. What the wires couldn't catch, faiths to give certainty. feels like a hiding place. Three separate acts, it ends in disgrace. In the morning everything is sane, and you make your way back home. Put it on just like an evening dress, parade to the right, sway to the left. In the morning everything is spent, and I make my way back home. Settle down, settle down, 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 down. Settle down for the night.
All right, there you have it. I only had the camera for about 2 days, so I couldn't get a ton of footage. But I tried to give you guys a decent look at the camera in various settings so we can break down some of this footage. But first, I want to talk about Dehancer. So full disclosure, Dehancer actually reached out to me to sponsor this video. That being said, they wanted a completely unbiased opinion on their plugin. So this is not scripted, they have not seen this video, this is just my opinion. And my opinion is, it is fucking incredible. I've used some film emulation plugins in the past, and a lot of them just sort of felt like Instagram filters. Dehancer does not work that way. It is incredibly nuanced. I'm just gonna briefly go over it because I'm actually gonna make an entirely separate video just on how good that plugin is. But essentially, it's a film look that you can add onto your footage. There's a ton of different film stock options, and then you can adjust things like grain, blooming, halation, and you can really dial in a very filmic image. I like that you can output from a Rec. 709, so you can use your color transforms and color your footage as you normally would, and then add Dehancer after the fact. Or you can keep your footage in a log profile, select your camera from the many choices that Dehancer has, and they're constantly updating it. Select your color profile, in this case Canon C-Log2, and then you can add your look in that way. I also like that everything is adjustable. So maybe you want to keep your footage exactly how it is using your own color workflow, but you just want to add something like highlight blooming or maybe halation. Well, you can simply toggle off the film stock and really just choose the settings you want to apply to your footage. They gave me a trial run so I could try it out, but honestly, when it ends, I'm absolutely buying this plugin. It's so powerful and it offers so many options to enhance the footage and get a look that you want. If you do want to try Dehancer out, go to the link below and make sure you use the promo code Meredith. If you use that promo code, you'll get 10% off. So although this video is sponsored by Dehancer, there's a definitive reason that I wanted to use them on this review, as well as shoot at 24 Hertz. So you heard me mention before, I always found the Canon cameras to just be a little digital and video-ish. So I wanted to try as many settings as I could to make this image more filmic. At shooting 24 Hertz, I was able to shoot a true 24 frames per second. And honestly, I didn't really find that there was much of a difference. By using Dehancer and adding a film look to the footage, I did find it made a huge difference. I think it absolutely helped to take some of that digital edge off of the Canon image. That being said, I think I stand somewhat corrected. Although I did not find the Canon C50 to have as digital or video-ish of an image as some of the other Canon cameras I've used, I still found that it did have some of that look to it. That could be in the sharpness, that could be in the motion cadence. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I don't believe this camera has an OLPF, so that might have been it as well. But I just found the image to lack the feeling that I have with some of the other cameras I've used. Obviously, that's incredibly subjective, and the Canon C50 still does a lot of things really well, which we'll get right into. But even with using vintage glass and anamorphic glass, I still found the image to just be a little too clinical and a little too digital. It really comes down to just a feeling I get when I bring it into my computer. For contrast, as soon as I bring red raw footage from the Nikon ZR into my computer, I can instantly see and feel that thickness of the negative. I think it has phenomenal motion cadence, amazing texture, and it just looks more filmic to me. Playing with the Canon C50 footage, I just didn't get that feeling. But let's get into what it does do very well. The colors are amazing. It's extremely flexible in the grade, and you can push the image in pretty much any direction you want. Now I know everyone's interested in the dynamic range, so let's look at that real quick. You can see here, compared to the ZR, it does have a little more dynamic range in the highlights. Is it a colossal amount? No. Maybe a half a stop or a full stop more in the highlights. And it is a little cleaner in the shadows as well. I do really like the way this camera handles noise. It's very fine and quite pleasing. And although it does have great dynamic range in the highlights, I did not like the way it handled the highlights. to me, it clipped really fast, which added to that digital video look. You can see here in comparison to the ZR. Even taking the log footage, you can see that the ZR has a little bit more of a gentle roll-off in the highlights, whereas the Canon clips really fast. So again, although it has more highlight range than the ZR and some other cameras, I wasn't a fan with how it handled the roll-off. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but those things add up. Things like highlight roll-off is one of those nuanced qualities that really adds to a cinematic image. Now it handles shadows pretty well, but it also breaks pretty fast. You can see here in this very underexposed image, we can only raise it up so much before it becomes pretty muddy and unusable. But this was severely underexposed. No one should really be overexposing or underexposing their shots by 4 stops. But we're here to stress test the sensor, so I wanted to show you guys anyway. Now this camera does have dual native ISO. You can see here in the shot at 6400, it looks beautiful. I didn't push it more than 6400, but my guess is this camera can go even higher and be pretty usable. So it's an excellent low light camera. So let's get into some of my final thoughts. For content creation, I think this camera is pretty phenomenal. It does have that mode where it can record vertical and horizontal at the same time, which is a nice addition, but I did not try that. Although I do shoot vertical content for clients sometimes, or they ask for vertical after the fact, I'm constantly reframing and manipulating the vertical image. So it's not really something I would bake into shooting horizontally anyway. But I can see where it might come in handy if you're shooting something still like a sit-down interview. I think the ergonomics and the features and all of that stuff makes this a really solid camera for a lot of different kinds of work. I can see this camera being awesome for documentaries, especially with that top handle. Great for things like wedding videography or corporate shoots, and just for things like general content creation and social media. In a narrative setting, I would not use this camera. Again, subjective, that's just my own personal opinion on it. But when things like the Nikon ZR exist for much cheaper, I wouldn't see any reason to use a Canon C50. That's definitely not to say it's a bad image. Like I said, I think it works really well for a ton of different types of content. Just not really the stuff that I like to shoot. And then, like I do with any camera, we have to give it context. And in this case, the main context for me is the price. Now this camera comes in at $3,900. In my humble opinion, that is just way too much. It's probably fairly priced if you're comparing it to something like an FX3, but with the amount of options available to us now, I just don't really see where this camera fits in. I can get almost 2 Nikon ZRs for the price of this one Canon C50. And to me, the Nikon ZR offers a better image quality, which at the end of the day is the main thing that I'm focused on. Or you can look on the higher end. If you're about to spend $4 grand, you might as well save money for another couple months and then just get something like a Pixis 12K. Which I also think has a much better image than the Canon C50. And it's a full-on proper cinema camera, which, depending on what you shoot, could be a good thing or a bad thing. So with the overall image quality and the price, this is not the camera for me. And I didn't get a chance to test the photography on this camera, but I'm sure it's really good. Canon has always had an outstanding reputation when it comes to photography. So I do think it's priced a little high. But if you do mainly shoot documentaries or weddings or are a content creator, and maybe you happen to take photos as well, I could see where the price is warranted. In that kind of world, this probably is one of the better, if not the best, cameras available right now. But that's just not my world. I want a camera that can do that stuff, but that can also give me an image and narrative filmmaking that I really like. And unless I'm renting for bigger projects, right now that camera for me is still the Nikon ZR. So that's my review of the Canon C50. I hope you guys learned some things, but I of course encourage you to go rent the camera yourself. This is just my subjective opinion on the camera. I'm not here to offend anybody. I know a lot of people love Canon. And like I said, I think for certain things, they're really, really good. But I'm sure some of you will still find time to be super mean to me in the comments. See you next time.